They say working alone at night is lonely, but for some it becomes unbearable. This is the story of 8 people who discovered that when the lights go out and the world falls silent, they're never truly alone. November 3rd, 2001, 10:47 p.m. The sprawling warehouse on the outskirts of Crestwood was quiet, save for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. It sat isolated, surrounded by empty fields and a chain-link fence topped with rusted barbed wire. Inside, Jordan Hayes, a 24-year-old stock clerk, prepared for another long shift. Jordan wasn't new to solitude. He'd worked graveyard shifts for over 2 years. But tonight felt different. As he clocked in, the air seemed heavier, charged with an unsettling energy. His co-workers had left hours ago, leaving him as the only soul in the massive building. Just another night, he muttered to himself, flipping through his clipboard. Yet something about the silence gnawed at him like whispers just beyond hearing range. At 11:02 p.m., Jordan noticed the first oddity. One section of the warehouse was darker than usual. Row 17, where old office supplies were stored, appeared almost completely swallowed by shadow despite the overhead lights being fully functional. He shrugged it off, assuming a bulb might have burned out. But as he approached, the temperature dropped sharply. Frost formed along the edges of nearby shelves, spreading unnaturally fast given the mild autumn evening outside. "What the?" Jordan whispered, touching the icy metal. He glanced around nervously, but no one else was there. Back at his workstation, things grew stranger still. A radio playing soft jazz suddenly switched stations mid-song, crackling with static before settling on white noise. When Jordan tried to turn it off, the dial wouldn't budge. It stayed stuck on static, filling the room with an eerie monotone buzz. Then came the footsteps. At first, Jordan thought it was just echoes from his own movements, bouncing off the walls. But these steps were deliberate, slow, and coming from deeper within the warehouse. They stopped near row 17. By 11:25 p.m., Jordan couldn't ignore the growing unease. Grabbing a flashlight, he decided to investigate. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing unusual, just dusty boxes stacked high and forgotten equipment, covered in tarps. But then he saw it, a trail of muddy footprints leading away from row 17, heading toward the loading dock. Each print was perfectly defined, as if someone or something had walked straight out of the rain-soaked fields outside. "This doesn't make sense," Jordan murmured, kneeling to examine them. "It hasn't rained in days." Before he could stand, the footsteps started again, closer this time, echoing directly behind him. Whipping around, Jordan found nothing but empty aisles stretching into the gloom. And yet, something moved at the edge of his vision. Something pale, darting between the shelves. As Jordan backed away, heart pounding, the static-filled radio crackled once more. This time, words emerged, a voice distorted and layered, speaking in fragments. "You shouldn't be here." The footsteps quickened, circling him now. Panic rising, Jordan turned to run, but froze as a cold hand gripped his shoulder. The lights flickered violently, plunging the warehouse into darkness. When they came back seconds later, Jordan was gone. When the past refuses to stay buried, it finds ways to make itself known. For Jordan, the shadows in the warehouse weren't just empty darkness. They carried memories too painful to forget. November 4th, 2001, 12:15 a.m. After disappearing into the darkness, Jordan regained consciousness, lying on the cold concrete floor of the loading dock. His head throbbed and his flashlight lay shattered beside him. The warehouse was eerily silent now, save for the faint hum of electricity coursing through the walls. As he stumbled to his feet, Jordan realized something was wrong. The muddy footprints from earlier had multiplied. Dozens of them now trailed across the floor, crisscrossing in chaotic patterns. Some were human-sized, while others were smaller, almost childlike. All led back toward row 17. Why would anyone invent something like this? Jordan whispered to himself, trying to steady his breathing. He knew logically that he should leave, call security, or even quit on the spot, but something compelled him to follow the trail. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was fear that if he didn't investigate, whatever lurked here would follow him home. At 12:30 a.m., Jordan reached row 17 again. This time, the shelves seemed different, taller, denser, as though they stretched infinitely upward. Boxes teetered precariously, some marked with faded labels, employee records, maintenance logs, and cryptic phrases like "do not open." One box caught his eye, a plain cardboard container with no label, sitting alone on the bottom shelf. Its lid was slightly ajar, spilling out yellowed papers. Against his better judgment, Jordan knelt to examine them. The documents inside were old payroll records, dated decades earlier. But what made his blood run cold were the names scrawled in red ink at the top of each page: Victor Lane, Claire Monroe, Samuel Drake. Beneath their names were single-line notes. Disappeared during night shift. No leads. Found unconscious near. Loading dock. Claims she saw shadows moving. Last seen arguing with supervisor before vanishing without trace. These are employees, Jordan murmured, flipping through the pages. Each record detailed someone who had worked in the warehouse and vanished under mysterious circumstances. Then he noticed something else. Every name was accompanied by a photograph, and in each photo, the person stared directly into the camera, their eyes wide with terror. By 12:45 a.m., Jordan's hands trembled as he placed the files back in the box. That's when he heard it. The sound of laughter. Soft at first, almost playful, but growing louder and more distorted until it echoed off the walls like nails scraping metal. "Who's there?" he shouted, clutching the flashlight tightly, despite its dead batteries. The laughter stopped abruptly. In its place came whispers, overlapping voices speaking in fragments. "Help us!" He lied. "It's not safe." Jordan spun around, searching for the source. The shadows between the shelves seemed darker now, shifting unnaturally as if alive. One shadow detached itself from the wall, forming the vague outline of a figure. It stood motionless, watching him. "What do you want?" Jordan yelled, backing away. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it pointed toward the far end of the aisle, where an unmarked door stood slightly ajar. A faint red glow seeped from the crack beneath it. Against all logic, Jordan approached the door. Written on it, in peeling paint, were the words, "Authorized personnel only." Pushing it open, he found himself in a narrow stairwell leading downward. The air smelled damp and metallic, and the walls were lined with exposed pipes dripping condensation. At the bottom, he entered a dimly lit basement filled with rusted machinery and stacks of forgotten crates. In the center of the room sat a large, wooden table covered in dust. On it lay more documents, photographs, and strange artifacts, a tarnished key, a broken pocket watch, and a journal bound in cracked leather. Opening the journal, Jordan discovered entries written in shaky handwriting. They know I'm hiding things. If they find out, I'll end up like the others. I can hear them calling me from the shadows. They're angry. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. Why did I let him talk me into it? The final entry sent chills down his spine. If you're reading this, it's already too late. Leave while you still can, or join us forever. Before Jordan could react, the lights flickered violently. When they stabilized, the room had changed. The walls were now plastered with newspaper clippings, all detailing disappearances linked to the warehouse. One headline stood out: "Local business owner accused of cover-up following employee deaths." Beneath it was a photo of a man Jordan recognized instantly. It was the warehouse owner, Mr. Caldwell, smiling smugly at a ribbon-cutting ceremony years ago. Surrounding the photo were handwritten notes. Caldwell bribed inspectors to ignore safety violations. Employees forced to work unsafe hours, many never returned. The truth lies below. Suddenly, the whispers returned, louder and angrier than before. The shadows converged, forming grotesque humanoid shapes that loomed over Jordan. Their glowing eyes pierced through the darkness as they closed in. And then, a voice, one clear and distinct, spoke directly into his ear. "You're next." As the figures lunged forward, Jordan bolted for the stairs. Behind him, the door slammed shut with a deafening crash, trapping him in the basement. The red glow intensified, illuminating a trapdoor in the floor etched with ominous symbols. With trembling hands, Jordan pried it open, revealing a spiral staircase descending into pitch blackness. From below came the sound of chains rattling and faint sobbing. He had no choice but to descend. When the truth hides in the depths, confronting it means risking everything. For Jordan, the basement was just the beginning. The real horror awaited below. November 4th, 2001, 1:12 a.m. The spiral staircase twisted endlessly downward, each step creaking under Jordan's weight as he descended into the abyss. The air grew colder with every footfall, carrying with it the stench of damp earth and decay. Faint whispers echoed around him, overlapping in a cacophony of voices that seemed to come from everywhere at once. At the bottom, Jordan found himself in a cavernous chamber illuminated by flickering red light. The source of the glow was unclear. It seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, which were lined with rusted chains and hooks dangling ominously. From the ceiling, in the center of the room, stood an ancient wooden altar, its surface carved with intricate symbols resembling those on the trapdoor above. "What is this place?" Jordan whispered, his voice trembling. He took a hesitant step forward, his flashlight beam cutting through the oppressive darkness. The whispers grew louder, forming coherent words. "You shouldn't have come. It's too late now." Suddenly, the shadows surged forward, coalescing into figures that resembled the people from the photographs upstairs. Their faces were gaunt, their eyes hollow, and their mouths moved silently as if trying to speak but unable to form words. One figure stepped closer, a woman wearing a tattered uniform, her face pale and streaked with dirt. She pointed toward the altar, her hand shaking violently. "Help us," she rasped, her voice barely audible over the din. "He's still here." Before Jordan could respond, a deafening roar shook the chamber. From the shadows emerged a massive silhouette, taller than any human, its body composed of writhing tendrils and jagged metal fragments. Its face was featureless, except for two glowing red slits where eyes should have been. Chains clinked as it moved, dragging behind it like serpents slithering across the floor. The creature turned its gaze on Jordan, freezing him in place. It didn't attack immediately. Instead, it tilted its head, studying him with an intelligence far beyond anything natural. "You're not supposed to be here," it growled, its voice a guttural mix of grinding steel and distorted human speech. "But since you've come, stay." With a wave of its claw-like appendage, the ground beneath Jordan split open, revealing a pit filled with skeletal remains. Some wore remnants of uniforms, while others were bound in rusted shackles. The sight made his stomach churn. "No!" Jordan shouted, stumbling backward. He grabbed a loose chain from the wall, swinging it wildly as the creature advanced. The impact sent sparks flying, forcing the monster to recoil momentarily. "Stay back!" he screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. But the shadows closed in again, surrounding him on all sides. The figures from before, the ghosts of former employees, watched silently, their expressions a mixture of pity and despair. At 1:27 a.m., Jordan realized fighting was futile. Instead, he focused on escape. Spotting a narrow tunnel leading out of the chamber, he bolted toward it, dodging grasping tendrils and leaping over piles of bones. Behind him, the creature let out another ear-splitting roar, shaking the entire structure. The tunnel twisted unpredictably, its walls slick with moisture. At one point, Jordan slipped, landing hard on his side. Pain shot through his ribs, but adrenaline kept him moving. Ahead, a faint glimmer of light appeared, a possible exit. As he neared the end, however, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. "You can't leave. You belong to us now." Reaching the opening, Jordan pushed through and found himself back in the warehouse. But something was off. The shelves were rearranged, the lighting dimmer, and the air thick with an unnatural chill. For a brief moment, Jordan thought he'd escaped. He ran toward the exit only to find the door sealed shut. No matter how hard he pulled, it wouldn't budge. Behind him, the sound of chains rattling echoed through the aisles. Turning slowly, he saw the creature standing at the far end of the warehouse, its glowing eyes fixed on him. Between them, the ghostly figures of the employees formed a semicircle, blocking his path. "We tried to warn you," one of them said softly, their voices layered with sadness. "Now you'll join us." The creature lunged forward faster than Jordan could react. Just as its claws reached for him, the lights flickered violently, plunging the warehouse into darkness. When they came back seconds later, Jordan was gone. When the veil between worlds thins, the past demands its due. For Jordan, the truth was more horrifying than death itself. November 4th, 2001, 1:35 a.m. Jordan awoke to find himself chained to the wooden altar in the cavernous chamber beneath the warehouse. His head throbbed and his wrists burned from the rusted metal cutting into his skin. The red glow pulsed rhythmically as if breathing alongside him. The ghostly figures surrounded the altar, their hollow eyes fixed on him with an unsettling mixture of sorrow and resolve. One by one they began to speak, their voices overlapping. In a haunting chorus, "We were betrayed. He promised safety. But he left us here to rot." Jordan strained against the chains, panic rising in his chest. "What are you talking about? Who did this to you?" One figure stepped forward, a man with sunken cheeks and torn overalls. He pointed toward the shadows, where the monstrous creature loomed silently, its glowing red slits piercing through the darkness. "Caldwell," the man rasped, his voice trembling with rage. "He knew what waited below. He used us as sacrifices, to keep it fed." The realization hit Jordan like a punch to the gut. Caldwell, the warehouse owner, had been covering up far more than unsafe working conditions. This place wasn't just a storage facility, it was a trap, a prison designed to contain something ancient and malevolent. At 1:42 a.m., the creature moved closer, its chains dragging across the ground with an ear-splitting screech. It stopped, inches from Jordan, its featureless face tilting downward as though examining him. "You're not enough," it growled, its voice reverberating through the chamber. "You'll do it for now, but I need more." Before Jordan could process the words, the ghosts surged forward, their forms flickering like static. They surrounded the creature, chanting in unison, "Take us instead. We've already paid." For a fleeting moment, the creature hesitated. Then with a deafening roar, it lashed out, its tendrils slicing through the spectral figures. Each ghost collapsed into ash, their final screams echoing through the chamber. "No!" Jordan shouted, tears streaming down his face. "Leave them alone." The creature turned its gaze back to him, its red slits narrowing. "Your time will come." As the last ghost dissolved, the chamber began to shake violently. Cracks spread across the walls and chunks of earth fell from the ceiling. The whispers returned, louder and more desperate than ever. "It's breaking free. We failed." Suddenly, a blinding flash of light erupted from the altar, forcing Jordan to shield his eyes. When the light faded, he found himself standing outside the warehouse, gasping for air. The building behind him looked different, older, dilapidated, as though decades had passed in seconds. Confused and disoriented, Jordan stumbled toward the main road, only to freeze when he saw a newspaper lying on the ground. The headline read, "Warehouse. Owner arrested after mysterious disappearances, November 4th, 1971. His heart sank. The date was wrong. According to the paper, the events he'd just lived through had happened 30 years ago. By the time Jordan reached town, exhaustion had overtaken him. He collapsed on a park bench, clutching the newspaper tightly. A passerby approached, concern etched on their face. "Are you okay?" the stranger asked. Jordan looked up, his voice barely above a whisper. "What year is it?" The stranger frowned. "It's 2001. Why?" Jordan didn't answer. Instead, he stared at his hands, which felt unnaturally cold. As the stranger walked away, Jordan caught a glimpse of his reflection in a nearby puddle, and froze. Behind him stood the ghostly figures of the employees, their mouths moving soundlessly as they pointed toward the warehouse. And then, the whispers returned. You're still connected. November 4th, 2001, early morning. Jordan staggered into Crestwood General Hospital hours later, his clothes torn and his body covered in bruises. Doctors diagnosed him with exhaustion and dehydration but couldn't explain the frostbite-like burns on his wrists or the faint red symbols etched into his skin, marks he swore weren't there before. The police questioned him relentlessly, asking how he'd ended up miles away from the warehouse without identification or memory of leaving. Jordan struggled to piece together coherent answers. All he could recall were flashes of the cavernous chamber, the monstrous creature, and the ghostly figures pleading for help. His fragmented account earned skepticism from investigators, who dismissed much of it as hallucination or stress-induced delusion. But Jordan knew better. He couldn't forget the weight of the chains, the coldness of the shadows, or the whispers that lingered in his mind long after waking. Over the following weeks, Jordan tried to rebuild his life. He avoided talking about the incident, fearing no one would believe him, or worse, that speaking about it might summon it again. But avoiding the truth didn't make it disappear. At night, sleep eluded him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the glowing red slits of the creature staring back at him. The whispers haunted his dreams, growing louder and more insistent with each passing day. By December, Jordan had stopped working entirely, unable to face enclosed spaces or fluorescent lights without feeling suffocated. His friends noticed the change. Once outgoing and dependable, Jordan became withdrawn, jumping at sudden noises and flinching when touched unexpectedly. When pressed, he admitted only fragments of what happened. Something followed me out of that place. Something I can't escape. Even therapy offered little relief. One counselor suggested writing down his experiences as a way to process them. Reluctantly, Jordan began journaling, but the entries grew increasingly erratic. Entire pages were filled with sketches of the symbols carved into his skin, along with disjointed phrases like, "It's still here. They're waiting." By spring of 2002, Jordan vanished. His apartment was found empty, save for a single note left on the kitchen counter. "I have to go back. It won't leave me alone." No one ever heard from him again. Years passed and the warehouse became local legend, a cautionary tale whispered among residents of Crestwood. Some claimed it had been demolished after Jordan's disappearance. Others said it remained standing, hidden behind overgrown weeds and warning signs. Either way, no one dared approach it. In 2015, a group of urban explorers broke into the site, posting videos online of their findings. They described strange phenomena: flickering lights, disembodied voices, and rows of shelves arranged in impossible patterns. One video captured a faint outline of a figure chained to an altar deep within the basement, a shadowy silhouette bearing an uncanny resemblance to Jordan. Local authorities investigated the footage, but the warehouse was nowhere to be found. Skeptics dismissed the claims as hoaxes, yet those familiar with the story felt chills running down their spines. As for Caldwell, the warehouse owner implicated in the tragedy, his fate remained shrouded in mystery. Records showed he died shortly after his arrest in 1971, though rumors persisted that he hadn't acted alone, that someone else had orchestrated the horrors beneath the warehouse, feeding the creature for reasons unknown. Today, the town of Crestwood thrives, its population oblivious to the dark history buried beneath their feet. New businesses occupy the land where the warehouse once stood, and families live comfortably in nearby subdivisions. Yet subtle signs remain. Children playing near the old property report seeing scarecrow-like figures watching them from the tree line. Workers at the local grocery store complain of misplaced items appearing overnight in row 17, the exact location where Jordan first encountered the muddy footprints. On November 3rd, the anniversary of Jordan's descent, residents claim to hear faint laughter echoing through the fields late at night. And then there are the markings. In basements across Crestwood, homeowners occasionally discover cryptic symbols etched into walls or floors, symbols identical to those Jordan documented in his journals. Attempts to remove them always fail. They reappear days later, darker and deeper than before. Somewhere below the surface, the creature stirs, Its hunger grows stronger with each passing year, fed by fear and despair. And while most believe the nightmare ended decades ago, those who know the truth understand otherwise. The shadows remember, and they're still waiting. The end